That antivirus pop-up that's come up, that came up while I was recording, and I actually didn't see it, that it was there. So for better or for worse, depending on your tastes, you don't really get to see the faces of these women, but you can certainly hear the rubbish that they're talking about. So I'll just show something right at the start.
There's a hidden crime wave in Australia, domestic violence.
Not long into the story, the other one says,
that is the plus side of it. The awareness has been raised.
which is obviously a complete contradiction of what Georgie had said. And look, you get these contradictions throughout these interviews, not just this one, all of them. It's because these scripts are written to drive the agenda. They're not commenting or looking at the agenda as it is and then talking about it. So because they're trying to guide it, they're coming up with contradictions because they're telling lies and it's just not coherent. But that's always an indication, and that's what they're doing with this particular issue here. So I'm not going to focus too much. It is fun actually trying to catch it about and all this sort of rubbish. You get a bit of a laugh, but I'm just going to jump straight to or focus what I think is the actual message.
Domestic violence is a national emergency.
When they write into these scripts ridiculous exaggerations such as it's a national emergency. Now, I know it's not a national emergency because I was out and about this morning up the street and there were just women going about. It wasn't like 50% of them had black eyes saying, oh, I walked into a door. And there wasn't, women sort of running past, oh, I've just been bashed. It was, but look, it does happen. But I'm just saying it's not a national emergency. And when they're exaggerating like this, the laws they want to bring in, because this is about bringing in some laws, I'll get to that in a little while, they are ridiculous, but they aren't justified. And the exaggeration isn't justified. So that's what it's a national emergency is all about.
Tracy McLeod-Howe is the CEO of White Ribbon Australia, and she joins us now.
But it is a national emergency. We need to take action on this now. And at the very root of this, it's disrespect for women, it's gender inequality. It's
typically what they do when they're trying to get an agenda that isn't justified across is they'll try and attach it to other agendas where there is no nexus or connection and to bolster it. But also they will have a co-agenda going at one time. And of course, this disrespect for women, that's one of their co-agendas that they've been banging on as well in other interviews. Now, the problem with that, obviously, is that it's assuming that all women should be respected. Well, they're human beings. Human beings should be accorded the respect that they deserve based on their individual behaviour and how they conduct themselves in society. Not all people are going to be respected by all other people. And also they don't add that it's only disrespect from men. So what, can women disrespect women? So she's leaving a bit out there, but that's what that connection is about. But obviously it's invalid. There's no connection between disrespecting women and violence. I mean, a lot of guys disrespect other guys or other people and they don't punch them in the head. So there's no connection there. And the other connection she's made there is gender equality, but she's being a bit obtuse there because that would probably need further explanation that she doesn't go into. So she's leaving an implied connection. Now, of course, according to the government and women's groups, men have the upper hand. They get paid more. Their lives are humming along. So that should actually be a disincentive to be agitated and therefore violent. But it is interesting that she mentioned gender inequality because I think what she's trying to introduce there without actually naming it, because it makes the government and all these women advocacy groups look bad, is that men are actually discriminated against in employment. Certainly with quotas they're trying to introduce, and the Defence Force was actually only recruiting women. And you've got the WGEA, the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, that targets industries that don't have 50% of their employees men and women, but they only target the male-dominated industries. They don't go after, and they have penalties for them, such as they can out them publicly or they can not get government contracts. So that's pretty serious. And that also doesn't, she also doesn't go into the family law courts, how the laws themselves and all the judgments are always in favour of women, ridiculously in favour of women. So if there is an agitation in men that is raising domestic violence incidences, it's government policy driven and feminist ideology driven. But they will never mention that. They will just say it's all men they've got it better anyway. So I think that's why she doesn't, first of all, mention any family law courts or anything like that as being a contributing factor, and she only just touched on gender equality without going into any detail. So I think that's what that's about.
So this is a national emergency.
Totally.
And yet it feels like we're not getting the adequate response to a national emergency from the government.
These pair of sellout idiots have unanimously reaffirmed that it's a national emergency, and they're not getting the adequate response from the government. Well, the main thing the government can do is introduce laws, and I think they're getting to what this is actually about.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting point because the community is mobilised around this.
But didn't Georgie say it was hidden? How can they mobilise around something that's hidden? Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Sorry about that. Let's get back to it.
But we need loud voices from government. We need our Prime Minister. We need the opposition to come out firing on this and say we will invest. We know what the answer is, by the way.
He and the people that wrote this script do already know what the answer is, by the way, because the answer is new laws and probably new funding, but the laws is the most important part. So they've already been written in the same way the Patriot Act was written before 9/11, in the same way the indefinite detention laws were written before Minto, that these laws have already been written. Now, what they're doing here, this is a really important part of the script, is that they've mentioned the Prime Minister and they've mentioned the opposition leader. That, it's like a 1-2 punch. That then gives the Prime Minister, well, it's been in the news, I'll now have to respond. But it's already been written. He already knows he's going to respond. He's not actually responding to this. He's just using this as justification for his role in bringing in this law, because this law is being brought in by nothing to do with our politicians. They're told what these laws are going to come in, and they just follow their part, and they get to keep their pensions and their lucrative and their many investment properties. So this is what this is actually about. So what Commonwealth laws could she be talking about? Because state law already covers domestic violence, and it's a local law. It's about assault and battery and AVOs. You go to jail and judges give AVOs, control orders, all this sort of thing. So there's already comprehensive laws that that are already in place as far as domestic violence goes. So what's this Commonwealth angle that they're going to be bringing in? And they're going to be bringing it in because she says we already know what to do. So they've already got it ready to go. And this is to justification for the Prime Minister to play his part, but it also puts into people's minds, oh, I remember them talking about that. That's why he's talking about it. It's not out of the blue. So these interviews and these scripts that are being read, they are very important when they bring in these laws to control people. Now, I'll just get to that in a second.
It's an integrated response. It's primary prevention right through to the crisis refuges for women, and by the way, for men to go somewhere so women are safe at home.
We have reached ground zero. So what she said there about women's refuges, that's not new. We already know that it's a crime to bash a woman, and she said preventative, that's the AVOs. The only thing new in this whole script is what she said right at the end there, a place for men to go so women will be safe. Well, if they're already convicted, they're in jail. So this is a place for men to go that obviously haven't been convicted. Well, how is that going to work? I mean, they've got AVOs, so a man's not, say, allowed within 50 metres of the woman, but he can go everywhere else, but that's not really controlling him. What about, that's a place for men to go? Well, that would only mean forcibly for them to go. Is she going to suggest that they're going to provide accommodation for men to just live and they'll be fine? No, that's the last thing they would ever do to keep women safe. I'm going to give them an apartment overlooking the harbour. Oh, you just go live there, will you? Sunshine, you'll be right. No, they're not going to spend money on that. Well, you'd have rorting all over the place, wouldn't you? You'd have guys, couples pretending that he's, going to bash her and, oh, under this preemptive measure, oh, here's an apartment. No, 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 no. They're not. That's not what this is about. The accommodation, if there is any, will be almost like a prison. It would probably be some of those either old, or they might even rebuild those hostels for that backpackers stay in. It'd be something like that. But They will also, how do they know that they are going to be away from the woman? To keep the woman safe, well, they're going to have to know where they are. Well, there's going to be some kind of control order where they have to wear an ankle bracelet. And they will only be able to go from this rudimentary accommodation to their workplaces, because if they're doing jobs that women don't want, they can go to those, and that will then mean that they can also pay off the house that the woman is still in. So that's what I mean. We've reached ground zero here. This is new. Having a place for men to go sounded innocuous enough, but when you think about it, look at what their options are and what their track records are, that's not a good thing for men.
But we need the money.
Yes, they do want more money, but I'm pretty sure it's not to put men into apartments who are a threat to their partners. So what's she talking about? She's sort of making a bit of a threat to them that, I'll continue doing these scripts if I get more money. Maybe that's what she's up to. Or just generally these sorts of jobs where they're like hers, where she just goes around doing a lot of talking, not getting her hands dirty, not getting no deadlines or anything like that, and being paid very handsomely for it. Maybe she's got a few friends that need some jobs, but she wants more money. Definitely wants more money.
I mean, we hear from the government when
Yep.
there's a drought, as
Yes.
rightly we should, when there's a strawberry contamination
Yep.
crisis, and yet there are women being killed every day in this country, and we're not hearing about it in that same way.
So now they're back just reconfirming that it is a national emergency by trying to compare it to things that were actual national emergencies, which is obviously the drought that affects farmers, that affects our gross domestic product. So that actually is a national emergency. And as far as the strawberries concerned, well, that was a national, a countrywide threat to people. So that needed to be dealt with. But I don't think they really called it a national emergency, but that's what they're trying to say that it was. And then they're trying to reaffirm, because what the laws they're going to be bringing in are going to be absolutely ridiculous. That one with as far as the control orders on men that I think is coming, there's going to be some other ones as well, but they're going to be ridiculous. So that's why, again, they're trying to conflate this as a national emergency. And look, it's bad, and women shouldn't be subject to domestic violence, but certainly it's not a national emergency. Statistically, I mean, it's not a national emergency. It is bad, but it's not a national emergency based on statistics, that it's not affecting the majority of women.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that the response to, the King hit, a couple of boys die up in King's Cross, for example. We changed legislation, we put money into it.
So there's the concrete evidence that this hit piece was about introducing new legislation by the Commonwealth. Remember, she mentioned the Prime Minister and the opposition leader.
Terrorism. But this family and domestic violence, violence against women and children, doesn't have the same response.
It's very appropriate and very strategic that they've included terrorism in this script, linking it to this operation, because they're from the same playbook, problem, reaction, solution. And through all the staged terrorist events, we've got all those surveillance, detention, and shoot you up laws, shoot to kill laws. Now, this one is in synergy with that, in that it is a control order that they're going to try and put on men. See, Prue Gowan and I did a video on it, where she was going to do domestic violence surveys in the workplace, and they even had some harebrained scheme of having hairdressers reporting domestic violence because women are too scared to mention it. Now that opens the door. Once they go out, take it from just being domestic into the workplace, that then expands it everywhere. So you can have a guy that's not even in a relationship, that they can stick one of these ankle bracelets on and have him stay in a place where they know where he is, so he's not a danger to the woman, as I mentioned before. Because Prue Goward alluded to declaring that violence against a woman in the workplace, or threat of it, constitutes domestic violence, because the woman has to be there essentially to earn her living, and he's there at the same time. They were talking about getting him fired. Of course, that would be their first option as well, because they want to demonetise men. That's one of their strategies as well. But also, like I said, you can have a guy not in a domestic relationship. They could just have a woman get a job somewhere where he is, and even just make a claim that he's threatened her with violence, and whatever control order they're going to have, it's not an ABO. Well, it's like an ABO, but it's going to have the guy having to stay in a certain place with his ankle bracelet on. So which guys would they be targeting for that? Well, when the bail-in comes, and the bail-in is where they're going to strip our bank accounts, and they brought the law in February this year before 7 senators. I did a video on that. Check my CEC video about the bail-in. Now, that's going to happen worldwide at the same time. They're going to crash it through Deutsche Bank. That's from my information that I got from Jim Willey. He's a financial analyst and a conspiracy theorist, so he's very good. He's across all this stuff. They're going to crash Deutsche Bank, and it's going to be like a big domino effect. Now, that bail-in law that they brought in Australia, and it's all over the world, it's in New Zealand, all over the Western world. How that works is that the country comes before individuals. So to save the financial system, we're taking your money. That's the premise of it, but really it has been designed to take all your money. Now, it's going to happen on a Friday afternoon. They're probably going to, initial reports are going to be it's a virus that's affected all the banking system. But of course, by the middle of the next week, they're going to say, oh, yeah, it was actually, the problem was caused by the overload and the position of the banking system. It was going to collapse. So therefore, the ATM stopped working. But it's all okay because in this democratic electoral system that you have control of, we've used a law that was brought in by people that you voted in to take all your money, and we've stabilised the system. But of course, the whole purpose was all along was just to take your money, and you're not getting it back. Now, can you imagine how pissed people are going to be? And there's going to be people that are going to be organising resistance. And traditionally, men are more warlike than women. So you're going to have men who are going to be more active in the resistance than women, certainly trying to be more effective. And it's those guys that they will be surveilling. They'll be watching his Facebook, and anyone that starts to be effective at organising, not just talking about it, but starts to mount some kind of resistance and movement to get the money back, well, that guy's going to suddenly find that some woman has accused him of domestic violence in the workplace. That's a thing now. It goes before a court. Here's your ankle bracelet. And they can, as soon as he associates with someone that they don't want him to, they could even blame that person for his domestic violence tendencies. Who knows? But it's a control order. So anyway, that's the way it's going to go down. We'll just watch the rest of this.
We know what to do to change this.
Well, you do know exactly what needs to be done, and you've already said it needs to be legislation and it needs to be Commonwealth. Now, it may not be exactly as I described the laws that they're going to bring in. There could be even more on top of that, but it'll be certainly something along those lines. But she's not mentioning it now because, like I said, this is like a 1-2 punch. So this is where they run this story here, and then the Prime Minister they give him his script, and he goes, okay, then, and I'll read this, and that's why she's not mentioning it now. That will come out. It'll make out like it was a politician's ideas.
It's no more about awareness raising. We know what the problem is. We know what it is. We are not going to stand for it anymore, and we want politicians to stand beside us.
Next year's again, she wants the politicians to stand beside us and bring in new legislation. She mentioned before that they need more money. I think she deserves a pay rise. I thought she read her script very well. As demonic as she is, and the aims of what she's trying to achieve, as bad as they are, she did it well. So I think give her some more money. There's a bit more to this, but it's just reiterating what I've already got there. So I've got to end it now. So yeah, this innocent little discussion between two women looks like it's at about an emotive issue. It's a Trojan horse for bringing in more freedom-stealing laws, which is targeted at men this time. So that's it.